Hi, my name's Daryl. I'm here at Canaweld today in Ontario, Canada, where we're looking at their lineup of TIG machines. We've got the 200 amp DC machine, the 200 amp AC DC machine, and the 280 amp water-cooled AC DC machine. We're going to start by going through some of the features, looking at the machines, what they're useful for, and to help you find out which one's right for you. All right, let's dive into this TIG DC 202 Pulse D machine. This machine runs TIG or stick, so it's a constant current machine. And you can plug it into, a neat thing about it is you can plug it into 240 or you can plug it into 120. The machine runs up to 200 amps in TIG and up to 180 amps in stick. It's good for non-ferrous metals, so if you're welding on carbon steel or stainless steel, and the recommended thickness setting is up to 1/4 of an inch thick with those maximum settings. This machine comes standard with pulse. I'm going to show you how to turn that on and what pulse is good for and how you're going to change those settings. We're going to get setting it up. It comes standard with a torch with a push button start-stop. It also comes with a work lead, a stick whip, and an option in the silver package is the foot pedal, which I recommend getting. So we're going to get the machine set up and plugged in, and then we're going to go through the settings and the interface, and then we're going to do some welding. All right, we've got everything hooked up to the machine here. This machine comes standard with a torch with a push button control, but we've got a foot pedal hooked up here to show you some of the features. So it's all hooked up. We're going to turn it on and go through the TIG features and how to set it up. When you turn the machine on, the first set of options is up in the top right corner. We've got standard DC TIG, we've got stick welding, and we've got pulse DC TIG. We're going to go through standard DC TIG to start. The second set of options that we're going to look at is whether we're using a foot pedal, whether we're using a push button, or whether we want a spot timer. For setting the machine up today, we're going to go through the foot pedal settings. So that's the top option. When you select that option, as you push down on the foot pedal, you have variable control. When you let off, it stops. If you were to choose the second option, when you press the foot pedal or you press the trigger, it's going to follow the sequence upslope. It's going to get to its maximum welding current. When you press the button again, it's going to downslope and turn off. And on spot timer, you're going to use that to weld for a certain number of seconds. If you were stitch welding something, you don't have to measure it after you've figured out your time. You can just turn the spot timer on and stitch weld your product. So we're going to place it on the 2T or the foot pedal setting. Now, as you press this button, it goes through our options, and there's a little graph here showing you what they mean. The first option is our pre-gas, how long the gas flows for before the arc initiates. On carbon steel, a typical setting is ½ a second. If you're looking for better gas coverage, you're welding on stainless or titanium, you're going to turn that pre-gas flow up. The second setting is the minimum starting amperage. So the second you hit the foot pedal, or if you are pressing the button, when you press the button, what amperage does the machine start running at? This machine will go all the way down to 10 amps. And of course, you can have it up to the maximum running amperage of the machine. For the purpose of this, we're going to leave it down in its lowest setting of 10 amps. The next option is the upslope. So how long it takes to get from our minimum amperage up to our maximum amperage. And even with the foot pedal, we can restrict it. So if we put it to the floor, we can say that it takes us a second or two to get up to our maximum amperage. Being a welder for a long time, I like to leave that at 0. I just like to use the foot pedal to check my slope. The next option is our maximum welding current. The machine goes up to 200 amps. However, we're going to set it closer to the welding current we're actually going to be using. So if we think that we're going to have a maximum amperage of 120 amps, I would like to set it at about 130. Setting it to that lower amperage setting gives you more finite adjustment on the foot pedal. So if you press it a little bit, it adjusts a little bit. Rather than if we max the machine out at 200 amps, if you press it a little bit, it's going to go up a lot more. So we're going to leave that at about 130. When we press the button again, you'll see that it skips the next option. That's because we don't have pulse turned on. It's going to go to our downslope time. Again, I'm using the foot pedal. I'm going to leave that at 0. But if you wanted to force a downslope, you could turn that time up to downslope. The next option there is our finishing amperage. So again, using the foot pedal, I'm going to turn it down as far as I can, but if you wanted it, if you're welding something thicker, you could leave it up a little bit higher where it's going to stop. And the last option is our post-gas flow. How long is the argon going to flow for when the arc has stopped, or when we stopped welding? For carbon steel, again, we're going to leave that at about a second. That keeps our tungsten nice and clean and keeps it from contaminating. If you're welding on stainless steel again, or titanium, or something that you don't want to oxidize, you want to hold the torch there and let the post-gas flow while the material's cooling, you can turn that number up all the way to 20 seconds of post-gas flow. For us welding on carbon steel today, we're going to leave that at 1 second. Okay, we went through the basic setup of the machine. Something that's really cool about the Canaweld lineup is all the machines have pulse built into them. So, pulse has a few advantages. It has quite a few advantages. Some of the more common ones that people look to use pulse for, the number one is lowering our heat input. So it helps us metallurgically, it helps it structurally, it helps things from warping. So we're going to lower our heat input with pulse. The other reason why a lot of people use pulse is for open root welding. It keeps our keyhole nice and even so we get good penetration without blowing through. And the third reason is just when you're starting to learn how to weld, if you really want that stack of dime looks on your bead and you're having trouble with your rhythm, you can set the pulse up to set a rhythm for you, and it's going to set that super nice stack of bead looking appearance. So we're going to turn the machine on, and we're going to look at how do we set it up on the pulse settings. So our light in the top corner now, it's going to be on the top one, which shows the DC wave going up and down. That's our pulsed wave. Now we've got a few more options. So we're still going to leave it on the foot pedal, so we've got full foot pedal control, but we've got 3 things to think about with pulse. The number one thing we got to think about is our background amperage. So what pulse does is it pulses between a high amperage and a low amperage. A high amperage and a low amperage. The low amperage is this setting here at the bottom. If our maximum amperage is set, here we'll set it back at, for easy numbers, our maximum amperage is set at 100 amps. We can then set our background current or background amps. So I've got it set here at 50. So it's going to go from 100 amps down to 50 amps. If we want it cooler on the background, we want the weld to cool down more, we can turn that down all the way down to our initial or our lowest amps, which is 10 amps. A good starting spot, I'd say, is about 60%. So if we had 100, we're going to do 60 amps. And then we've got 2 more things to consider. So that's our foreground amps and our background amps. But we've got 2 other options. As we scroll the light across, it comes to this, and it's showing a shaded part of the top of the cycle. So that's the amount of time, or the percent of time, that it's going to spend in your maximum amperage. So it's not 50-50, we can adjust that. So we can adjust that all the way up to 90% of the time at 100 amps, 10%, or we can go down to 10% of the time at 100 amps, 90% of the time at 50 amps. I like to set it again at about 60%. So we're going to be pulsing from 100 amps down to 60 amps. And in each second, if we had it set at 1 pulse, it's going to run for 0.6 of a second at 100 and then 0.4 of a second at 60. The next option on here is my pulse frequency. So when I explained those numbers, I said we're going to have 1 pulse per second. So in 1 second, we're going to have 1 high for 0.6 of a second, 1 low for 0.4 of a second. A lower pulse frequency is what we're going to use to get that nice stack of dimes looking weld. So it's nice, slow, high, low, high, low, high, low. If we're looking at open root welding, we're going to want a faster pulse speed. We're not using it now to get that nice bead looking. We're using it to control how much penetration we get. In that scenario, we're going to run from about 5 to 20 pulses per second. Okay, and if we're looking for lower heat input, so we can set a maximum amperage that's going to make everything molten, and then it's going to cool down on that background pulse. We can set our pulses per second on this machine all the way up to 200 pulses per second. So in 1 second, it's going to go through 200 cycles at your maximum amperage, 200 cycles at your lower amperage, following the percentages of time and the maximum and minimums that you've got. We're going to set up some weld beads here. We're going to set up some joints, and I'll show you the difference between a pulsed weld and a non-pulsed weld.